Hi guys, so we're going to continue on in our content and we're going to be looking at Unit 5 and soil. So soil is an important component of ecosystems. So we're going to learn about the properties of soil and how water is able to flow through it and why it is so important to have a specific type of soil within ecosystems. All right, so let's look at soil together. All right, so we know that, as I said, got the wrong end of my pen going. Okay, so soil is an important component of ecosystems. Okay, it is part of basically all of the spheres that are contained within the earth. So when we talk about spheres, we say that it is part of the atmosphere. Okay. It's part of the lithosphere. So the lithosphere is essentially like the crust layer of the earth. Remember that crust, mantle, core? It's basically just a top layer. Okay. So atmosphere, lithosphere, the biosphere, the living component, because it does house lots of different types of diversity, animal and plant life. And it's also part of the hydrosphere because water is able to move soil around from place to place. Okay, so we need to understand how soil is produced. So, where we see a lot of misconception is when you hear people say the terms weathering versus erosion. It is not the same thing. Okay. Weathering is the actual process that produces the soil, and erosion is just the movement of soil around from place to place. So, soil is actually produced by weathering. Okay. Produced by weathering of rock. So rock is what we call the parent material. It's where it originates from. So we have two types of weathering, physical and chemical weathering. So physical weathering right here are going to be actual physical forces of nature. So things like wind and water. Okay. So this large crack was actually formed by ice. So when water gets into a small crack originally, and it freezes, water expands, and so it causes that crack to deepen. It's what happened with everybody's pipes over the winter storm. Like my pipes, they busted is because water expands in the pipes when it freezes. And then we have chemical weathering. So this is actual chemical components. And where we see this, I'm not talking about like pouring acid on a rock. I'm talking about chemicals produced by plant life. And we see this specifically with what are called lichens. So lichens in primary succession, okay, they basically when they're growing, they secrete this acidic type of fluid and it can break down the rock. Okay. All right. So this is a very unique structure that was formed, and this was formed by water running through this. And it's just it gradually grew over time. Obviously, this river is no longer here because this was probably thousands, if not millions of years ago. Okay. Now, when we look at soil, we can view soil as a system. So soil can be viewed as a system. Okay, so let's look at the components. The first part is it has organic and inorganic matter. Okay. Secondly, water is added through precipitation, right? Okay. And then thirdly, if we think back to the nitrogen cycle, soil contributes to the atmosphere. Let me scoot this down to have more space. So it contributes to the atmosphere. So I'm going to put specifically the nitrogen cycle, because remember there were bacteria that had to convert the nitrogen back into gaseous form and release it into the atmosphere. Okay, so let's look at erosion. So we have weathering, okay, weathering, so the production of soil. And then we have erosion, which is the movement of soil from place to place, okay? So when soil gets moved to a new location and it stays there, that's called a deposit or deposition, okay? So if we look here, let's look at in a stream, for example, we have different sized particles, sand or soil particles. We have gravel size, sand grains, and then clay size. So if you look, the heaviest ones obviously are going to sink to the bottom because they have more mass. The ones that have the least amount of mass are going to be able to travel the furthest, just because they have less mass, right? So the smallest particles are going to be able to be deposited much further away from that original location. So erosion is the movement of soil from place to place. Okay. So once it has left a location, it has been deposited. And again, that is called deposition. Okay. All right, so let's look at our next picture together. All right, so we can essentially look at soil as an ecosystem. Okay. So if you look right here, yes, we've got our solar energy, we've got our producer, and we have our organic matter, and we can essentially build a food web off of soil. Okay. So soil itself can be considered an ecosystem, just like a tropical rainforest or a desert or a tundra. The soil itself can be an ecosystem, and the reason is because it contains billions of organisms, okay? So I'm not just talking about things that we can actually see with our eyes, actual bacteria, which is a huge component of the nitrogen cycle, okay? So contains billions of organisms which break down organic matter. So think about it, guys. When you have an animal or a plant that dies, how are those components actually being returned to the soil? It's being broken down by decomposers that are already there in the soil itself, okay? So what happens is they release nutrients for plant growth. Okay. And as I said before, it contributes to the nitrogen cycle as well. Okay. All right. So why is soil so important? So there are 4 main functions of soil. Okay. So the first one is right here. It is a medium for plant growth. We understand that. We've known that for, a very long time, since like first grade. Okay. The second is it breaks down organic material and recycles the nutrients. We've established that when we look at how bacteria functions within a food chain. Okay. The third, it is a habitat for a variety of organisms. So lots of different animal and plant life, as well as bacteria, live there. And it filters water. And you're going to actually watch a lab that someone else has done where it shows how it filters water very effectively. So it's important that we protect soils, because it means that we are protecting water as well. So if you protect soils, you protect water. Okay. All right. So the process in which soil is made can take a very long time, as you can imagine. We're talking about thousands of years. So again, what I said right here is the parent rock. Okay. The parent rock is what the soil is made from. So that will determine the types of components that are within the soil itself, depending on what the parent rock is. So what the soil is made from. Okay. So the parent rock is weathered. That's step one. Okay. Step two, organic material accumulates. Okay, because you have things dying, so the nutrients are going to start to accumulate. Okay. And then three, you'll have more organic material present in mature soil. So that basically means we've had lots of death over a long time. Okay. So what you need to understand about soil as it is a system. All right, we're going to draw a rectangle down here. That is a very ugly rectangle, but at least you guys know what it is. So soil is a system. Okay. We need to understand what goes in to soil and what comes out of soil. So what are our inputs? What do we put into soil? Okay. Well, if you think about plant growth, we know that we're definitely going to be adding fertilizers. We also have nitrogen fixation. Remember, the bacteria are a huge component of the nitrogen cycle. We're going to have animal and plant residue, meaning death. Okay. And also, most importantly, precipitation, because water is a huge component of a soil system. Okay. So all of those things are inputs. They're going into soil. Now, because we put these things into soil, what are we getting back from soil? So what are the outputs, is what we call them. So these are the outputs. Okay. We get crops, right? We get erosion sometimes, unfortunately, and we get denitrification. So that nitrogen that we put in has to be returned back to the atmosphere. So you guys need to know inputs and outputs of soil. Okay, in the next video, we're going to focus on specific soil properties.